We're going to start by getting centered on our bolster against the wall. So when you sit on the bolster with your feet in cobbler's pose, I want you to orient your back muscles so that you can experience the motion of the ribs. They're the varied arches, right? You've got your 3 different vertebral columnar zones. And so with those different brackets, we know that the lower bones, right, in the back are good at the arching. So you can feel that openness in the back if you slide your hands there. But try, even if you've got your head in a little bit of something tied behind it, try to move your head back to the wall. And then if you can let your eyes come to a glided close and bring the hands so that they're touching through the legs, and that you can feel when the hands touch the legs that the direction is moving outwards and then downwards with the hands. So noticing the direction of the spine when you enhance that connection of the arms, kind of disciplining the legs. Be careful that the hands are high enough on the thigh, that there's no pressure on the knee, but there is a stretch around the knee. So my feet could be close, they could be distant. You might want to explore the positioning of your feet. And of course, you'll notice how your upper back feels connected to your wall. Okay, now we'll take the hands to the bolster. I know you might be opening up the eyes to see visually, but we'll stretch both legs in front. So push out through your heels, bring your arms over and up to the wall, and feel the thumbs maybe touch the wall, the palms facing towards each other, but finding that experience of the back arch. We'll stay with the arms lifting. So we have an experience of length through the sides and reach through your heels. Breathe, let the belly be soft, let the ribs elevate, and then we'll bring the hands together in front of us towards the feet, but the legs stay straight-ish, the back as long as it can be. Interlace your fingers, yes, and then push the palms forward. And feel if you can draw the left foot in, knee open, the right foot in, so they come back to that rotating out cobbler's pose, meeting the feet again. And then as the hands move back to the legs, the direction is out and down. Okay, so noticing the connectivity here with the spine up. Okay, and as the breath pulses through, do you feel it mostly in your core body or in your upper body? So explore the movement of the belly with the breath. Mouth closed, inhale, belly full. Exhale, if it feels most comfortable, out of the mouth, belly draws towards the spine. And now feel when you move your head away from the wall, it's quite comfortable for most of us to look down, to round. So what we'll do is we'll bring the knees up, hands are going to push onto the bolster, and then scoot your feet forward so it's easy to come down. And we'll turn ourselves back with our feet towards the wall, but we'll have our feet up on the bolster. I have a surprise visitor here. I didn't think she got in here. Okay. All right. So I've got my belt around my connecting to make a circle underneath my tush, and go ahead and buckle it up so you're prepared. Okay. All right. Now, as you move the belt to your back, we'll go right into it because we just don't know what our limits are. But I've got my feet at the wall, so it does feel a little bit tense with the belt around my upper back zone. It's kind of mid to upper rib space right now. But I want you to find where there's a lot of restriction with the belt. You can feel it hold in you. And then if your legs are in comfort, resting a little bit on the bolster, the feet to the wall, start to move your feet up the wall. And I want you to slowly, and this is important that we go gradually, to tip back into that belt. We understand that you might be futzing with the belt quite a bit to get it to feel comfortable in your skin. And as you lean back, you'll flow the feet off of the wall, and maybe the arms flow forward, palms facing in, or if you prefer, palms towards the ceiling. But find where your limit is when you lean back with the core contraction. And then when the rib cage centers, we're going to come back forward to the feet to the wall or to the bolster. See if you can have them at the wall. Make sure that the buckle is not in a place that's uncomfortable for your skin. And then stay with that very deep hold on the legs. Now, this I think would cause a discussion group, this one. But what I want to bring importance to is that the belt is holding your legs. If you didn't have the belt, you would have probably cramping and tightening in the hip flexors. Okay, so feel even at your belly. It's going to be full. I don't know if it's full or not, but it's going to be able to move and soften with the breath. There's no type of work where we're trying to pull it back deeper. But let's be sure that that's a calm space in the torso. And then feel when you bend your knees, almost like you point your toes, and then lift up the heart towards the ceiling and then lean back. If there's discomfort with the belt, like it's pulling, you might adjust that, but stay with that connection of the core. It might bulge a bit, but get a feel of your posterior core working. And then certainly try to reach your arms forward. See if you can aim forward with the arms and keep the lift of the heart. Good, there you go. Yeah, and hopefully the top of the thighs don't have a difficult time right now. It might be a little bit of mystery balance if it really is a core pose. I think this one feels kind of semi. There's quite a bit of comfort using the belt. Okay, now as we start to move the feet back forward to the wall, you're going to unbuckle, but keep the belt and now connect it to your soles. Okay, that means the foot. So we'll bring the belt forward around the bottoms of the feet and then make sure that that strip of pressure on the bottom of the foot goes right across. So if you try to span your toes, it's like the balls of the feet are like a uni ball. Doesn't make sense. It sounds like a pen, but I'm trying to push both balls of the feet into the belt forward so that it's just one kind of bar that the belt is across. And as I pull and use my arms now, I want you to use the arms quite actively to pull so your elbows have to bend. And then feel that scoop, the bend of the knees. And maybe this time you start to straighten the legs and the legs go up towards the ceiling. Now, curious if you had straight legs with the last supported boat pose around the legs in the back. We all had a little bit of that straight leg pattern. I think so. Now, as you lean back, noticing if the centerpiece of the pose is the pelvis. It's kind of what drops down to the earth. And then as you slide the hands down the belt, use the arms, but recruit the biceps like you're doing a little bit of a bicep curl. You got that. And then as you get a feel here of the legs straight, the key is straight, 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 straight. So work with flexing the feet, with the length at the back of the legs. All right, and then bend your knees, feet on the bolster, slide the belt away. And we're going to scoot our seat closer to the bolster, okay? I want you to be pretty close that your knees are in a deep bend. So we're not kind of cramming ourselves all the way to the wall, but we'll find out very fast what this is about. So we're going to do a bridge set. So we're doing core continuous. And as you lower onto your back, You're going to push down into, actually push your feet so the toes are lifted up. My head is back. I don't have a blanket under my head, but if you need one, use it. And we'll do it kind of just from the raw, like most of a very pure bridge pose. So when I push my feet to the wall, I'm going to lift up my hips. Okay, so I've got balls of the feet at the wall, heels on the bolster. And then I'm going to slide a second setting block, so the second height under the back of my pelvis. Then I'm going to slide my upper back a little bit behind me. This way, having no blanket makes it kind of comfortable. And I'm going to keep situating that block under my sacrum so that I can straighten my legs out. The reason I had it so close to the wall is so that you can keep your feet firm at the wall when you line up the core that we were just working. So the closer you get with your legs straight and the feet making imprints into the wall. So notice the parts of your feet that touch, and the spacing of the feet is up to you. If you want them very close so that you feel the inner leg touching or a little bit of separation. And the knees may kind of bump up a little bit to a slight bend and then kind of settle down to straight-ish. So with this position, can you spend a few moments making sure that this block under your pelvis is right on, it's not tilted. And so if you can touch that block all the way to the floor and make sure it's not tilting your pelvis, so it's quite anchored. And I tend to scoot the block higher up on my back than used to. So it really is ensuring that sacroiliac support. We don't want that joint, right, to be unstable. And then if you have sand, put it across the top of the thighs. Personal choice, okay? And if the sand is across the thigh lids, you'll feel a little different in the knees and the connectivity of the feet. They may push at different borders on the bottoms. So once you get that sand pretty even, as far as you can tell, then the arms are going to be down towards the wall. And I'm trying to roll my shoulders down and in, and the palms relaxed. So if we were to look at your alignment, there's likelihood one arm is a little different than the other for this position. And again, if you need something under your head, use a small towel, use a blanket that's very low if it's too intense pressure for your skull. But you might like the ability to let the chin motion towards the chest with the spine stretching all the way through the brainstem. And then finding that level of feeling in your upper lungs. So come into supported bridge. Good. Let the shoulders do the best they can to stay in that rotation so the chest can open. And if there's a slight difference from one to the other side of the shoulders, feel if you can bring some symmetry to your breath in the lungs, the pair of lungs. So a 3-part breath, the breath from the belly spatially, a little bit higher on the inhale to the heart. That full 4 count inhale. And then on the exhalation, let the breath spill out of the lungs. Now noticing the curiosity in your core. It's such a dynamic experience to be a core, right? There's organs, there's the muscle mystery on how to feel that it's compact and it's helping order our movement. in a supportive way. And some days it feels like it's not very strong or useful. So just noticing how your centerpiece feels and truly push into your feet, right? Feel their action into the wall. This is why having the feet at the wall is probably your best bridge pose that you could do. And it's how we're going to set up to bring our legs up today. So we'll have that connection of the feet touching something and pushing. So let's say your knees are in a mildly fragile space right now. I want you to try to work on pushing through the balls of the feet. These are all things we started with, right? We did the boat pose with the belt, the ball of the foot, and now the feet to the wall. So if the ribs feel so empowered that you want to slide your hands out a little farther distant from your mat, that's fine. So noticing if that gives you kind of a glorified feeling of length in the front, if the arms move a little farther out. Just think if you were in a standing pose and you had your arms by your sides, kind of militaristic, it might feel a little bit tense in that core, but if they just go a little bit out, you can lift the heart, right? So as we distance the arms for a few moments, we push into our feet. And now we'll slide the sand away for the moment and bring your feet to the bolster. Take extra good care of your back here. So any little tension that may have developed in that back space, I want you to spend a moment pushing into your feet, and maybe you lift your hips a little bit, maybe you stay on the block. But we'll bring one knee at a time up, and I recognize the block is a very stiff piece of furniture to put your body on, right? And there's a reason for that for the sacrum. It's maybe some schools of thought decide that that's a better place for the structure than like a bolster for legs up. So it just depends on the piece of furniture you have, I think. But as the legs lift, feel the arms position. Notice if you move them out to cactus, if this changes the challenge in the core muscles, which I like the shift because the inversion, right? Just any inverted posture places the weight of the organs on the diaphragm. So during the inhalation phase, the diaphragm has to push the abdominal organs, right? So if you're not inverted, it's just not as challenging for your breathing muscles. So not that you can be upside down all day long or even once a day. It's sometimes challenging to get there, but find that experience of the inhalation, it must lift the core. Because that diaphragm is going to shift directionally, it's shifting up towards the pelvis on the inhale. Right, and during the daytime, there's that gravitational downward kind of drop of the prolapse of the organs, right? And so this is the advantage. So I would encourage you to go cactus arms in this position if possible. And then feel the feet separate. If that's an intentional shift in your bone structure, it might be very subtle right now. Just to separate the feet a tiny bit, to feel the comfort of a relaxed foot and the draining of the legs. Viparita Karani, right? It's certainly the king, queen of therapeutic poses, right? Because it's adaptable for most of us to get into this versus a headstand. Now, energetically, we'll take the moments ahead here to stay with the legs straight-ish. But there is some interesting sensation sometimes in the place the block is, right? It kind of spreads and radiates from there. So what I'll do is bring us into a pattern. Actually, I want us to release the back and then we'll go to a bridge flow pattern. So when you let the knees go to that bending kind of perplexed position, so you go from that flexion, and then as you lower down your feet, feel the feet push. Now the bolster's at the wall, so you can push all the amount that you want and you won't lose your bolster this time. So you're gonna lift your hips, and then as you slide your block away, get a feel for the arms stretching back down besides your hips. And then as you're pressing and your glutes are activated, we're gonna lower the spine and feel the muscles on the sides of the spine centering, and then the front of the spine, the core, and then really push into the bolster once you get all the way down. Okay. Now try to stay with this here as we shift on. We're going to take our bolster and kick it to the right side of your mat and push the right foot into the wall. Okay, bolster on the right side of the mat. Cross the left leg over to that bolster. Might feel kind of good. Shift it up here. And then take a ball to the sacrum. Now that just had a block in the arena, the sacrum arena. So this might be very cozy for your sacrum. And feel, if you can, the right foot at the wall is sort of mediocre support at this point. I've bent my knee, I'm focusing on the curve of my hip. So I'm not so dedicated to my foot pushing into the wall. It just got me here. So if you like using the wall to kind of reinforce and push, that's up to you. But here it's where you might want a blanket under your head. You might want it. It's not required, but it's there if you want it. And then add a sand to the external left, into the hip, into the leg, towards the knee. Good placement so you can send the left arm open. Then you have this spiral of the ribs, the support of the spine in the twist. And as we're working with the twist, that intra-abdominal pressure intensifies. So that's why it's essential to let the abdomen move comfortably with the breath. Not holding the breath, but let the experience of breathing become all the more interesting when you're twisting. That's something you might notice with the two poses that strengthen our diaphragm are inversions and twists. Right? They're quite direct with how the diaphragm has to communicate with the organs. They're going to have to communicate somehow. They're in close quarters. They're in quarantine in there. So when the left arm is either open, depending on how it feels for your shoulder, feel where there's a little bit of expansiveness through that left upper chest. Eyes might close for a few moments here and search for sensation in a twist. Search for the rotations, right? Imbibition, so we're hydrating the tissues and the vertebral column and discs, giving it some time. Now, as we move the sand, we're going to do a core piece between the sides. So move the ball. And as we come back to feet on floor and knees, we got hips distance to start here. Hands beside your hips, palms down. And as you push down into your sacrum, so it's like you're doing a little bit of arching and flexing the spine. Try to find that fluidity of arching and flexing like cat-cow spine. And then as you go into more of a cat back, you'll bring your knees to your chest And we'll stretch both of the legs up, but I want you to flex your feet and then move the legs forward directionally towards the wall. Now, touching the wall might be a bit much, but that's one of the teachings of this shape is if you're close-ish to the wall, you can actually touch the wall and then push into it and give a few moments of finding some relative relief when you touch the wall. But then you've got to get back up, right? So instead of trying to bend the knees to get there, unless you have to, of course, if you have to, it's so nice that they can bend, isn't it? You'll push into your hands and bring the legs back to 90 degrees. And you'll inhale because that's essential. And exhale, legs go forward, right? It's control. You might touch the wall, give it a moment where you can be there and then come back up. Great. Now, as you alternate these paths of movement, just notice if it's different in your hip flexors comparatively to one where we're sitting and doing boat pose, right? So this is the reclining version. Different therapy opportunities for our back. So last time we come up to 90, I want you to get a feel of bending the knees and reaching to the sides of the feet. So you've got to bring your elbows on the inside of the knees, but keep this happy baby pose. So it's not a real expansive happy baby. The feet are fairly close. So you'll get more of the back, mid back support to kind of iron that out. You could, of course, rock side to side because that's part of that, the nature of that posture. One of the energetics is rocking. So get a feel of your back lingering in movement and support. Breathe. And then let the hands slide to the back of the upper legs, bending, and then lower your feet to the floor and take the bolster to the left side. So we're doing this setup to prepare for very soon when we'll do a steady round of standing poses today. And we're doing them today without the chair for a reason. It'll be a little more challenge. But what I want you to prep here is to feel how the full body can engage with the floor supporting you entirely. So now we have the bolster on the left, we've got our left leg straight-ish. We'll cross the right leg to the bolster. So if you have a ball, you will likely use that at your sacrum and be comfortable enough that you can kind of linger in this open quality of your hip as well as your chest. Adding some sand. Adding a perspective of twisting in the flesh of the hip and the ribs. If your ribs didn't twist, right, your hip would not have this developing current from the back force into towards the knee. So as you rotate maybe your chest to the right, your head turning and relaxing on the blanket, feel that open quality at the right arm and stretch out both of them and relax your eyes and breathe. Yeah, try to linger here, noticing the dedication you have to the floor to support you. Because soon enough we'll be upright with our feet under us as our only support. So it's good to feel how you could let this pose bring you kind of a sense of traction in your ribs and blood flow and fluidity and hydration in these joints and these abilities to mobilize. That's a key focus in the field is mobilization. Keeping mobile. So a few more moments, a few more mobile moments for the hip. You know, feel how the abdomen is possibly slanted more left than it is to the center. And that's okay. You might enjoy having your stomach feel like it's getting a very deep workout in the beginning of the session. So this core piece feels like it's really valuable for your life force. So what I think we'll do, a little bit off track, so we can get to the standing, want us to slide that sand away, and we'll do our last bridge from this position, this vantage point. We'll go without the wall. So I want you to move the ball away, and actually move it just away from the sacrum for a moment so you know where it is. And we'll bring your knees in and place the ball, or if you don't have a ball, use a block between the knees. You might not want your blanket on this. And we'll take it so when your feet lower down, you'll bring the arms so they're back overhead. So you have that full reach. Maybe your blanket is under your arms, no big deal. Now squeeze into the object between the knees, squeeze the ball. And then as you keep the squeeze, you're going to lift up your hips. And rather than how high your hips get, because your ball is probably limited that it can stay there with a squeeze, you're going to lift up just that right amount. If your knees hurt, then you scoot your feet farther forwards. If they hurt at all, right? You don't want knees to hurt. If you can help it, right? If you can find some resolution. So keep that really deep squeeze. That's the key. It doesn't feel like a luxurious bridge pose. We use this pose to get to all parts of the body, huh? All right, now lift the heels, bring your arms towards the ceiling, and then lower the spine down. Heels are lifted. Bring your knees to your chest, remove the ball, and then let's roll to a side and come around to face away from the wall and get a blanket so it's under your knees. And you probably have to tuck it back quite a bit, because I tend to find that when I get my bolster now in front as well, that I don't estimate this blanket support as important or closer to the wall than I think it should be. So put it back far towards the wall so you get an ample amount of knee support. And then come down to the feel of the hands underneath the shoulders. Pull the bolster in pretty close to the blanket and have a feel of where the hands under the shoulders, widening out the hands so they're not as wide as your mat, but they're fairly broad. And then as you come into cat pose, feel the back stretch and round and chin towards the chest. My feet are at the wall. Inhale, chest swoops under, forward, arch the back, cat-cow. Continue along this circulation project. I think I'm simply a circulation educator. Okay, so as you explore in your process here, when you're alternating these positions, right? Each of them is a position, right? You may not end up wanting to stay in one of these for a minute. That might feel like kind of difficult in your back or your shoulders. So next time you come to neutral, bring your front paws a little farther forward by the top of the bolster, and then lie your core, especially your leg core, on the bolster. I don't know if you've heard the discussion about the core starts at the inner leg. There's always a discussion about something creative thought, but when you're pushing into the wall here and your hands are feeling it starting to generate in the wrist, I imagine, I want you to work on lowering down. Now, one thing you can try for the wrist, and it depends on how tall you are, I think. This is a tall issue. It could be interpreted two ways, huh? Put your blocks under your hands, just for chaturanga's sake. Chaturanga, we're not going to do that. So your feet are at the wall. That's pretty obvious. The blocks under the hands, but when I bring my elbows in by my sides, this is a chaturanga pose. It's a challenging pose, right? Even if you're with a lot of support, you can feel it kind of build up in your back muscles and create some strength. So you're going to freshly push down into your hands and lift up into upward facing dog with the knees resting on the blanket. So your knees are in that full creased position. Now, if this is easier on your wrist and your back muscles, just notice how it feels in your low back. Now come back down. So all the way forward and down, elbows by your sides. Okay. Push the blocks just a little bit out, hands on the floor, and then come up again for that up dog and notice if it's any different. Your legs can stay bending. They don't have to straighten out, but you feel if it's different in your lower back, if it's a little bit shorter, tighter than with the blocks. Does it feel better or worse? It's hard to put a thumbs up or down when you're in this pose, isn't it? Blocks or no blocks. Okay. Take the next time with or without the blocks, you choose. It's going to be personal choice. I won't know. Okay. So next time you push up, you either have your blocks under you or you don't, deciding what works for your spine. As we kind of analyze this, not necessarily looking at our screen, how it should look, or you have the basic experience of the waist stretching, the core lengthening. Now concentrate on that core arch. We know this is not a basic practice today. So feel that bit of challenge. Part of it is working through that. And then as you lower down, back on down, we're gonna now make sure we got no blocks. Well, actually you could do dog pose with blocks if you wanted. Good. Hands on the ground or blocks. Come back to table. And then we lift up the knees and we stretch our heels towards the base of the wall. Not required. Heels up at the wall is pretty cool too. So feel what works for you to get your arms to straighten. Now, if I have my blocks underneath, I prefer that for this pose. I get a little more length because I feel short and a little more stretch in my chest, just the right amount. But the blocks sometimes get slippery, so you have to find what works for you. Try to get your heels down to the floor. Try to work with the feet hips distance apart, heels to the floor. And then as you reach, you decide hands on blocks or take them off. And then I want you to keep that extension, it's spine extension. Walk your hands back to the blanket. You'll probably run up into the wall at this point with your seat. So you might push the blanket a little farther forward away from your toes and then scoot your feet farther away from the wall so your tush can touch the wall. And I want you to keep that spine extension, right? So we're trying to prevent this roundedness, okay? Even when we do a forward bend. So take your hands up onto your bolster and keep that spine extension, right? There you go, good. So you have that lengthening. I know, even though your mind goes, wait a minute, if I drop my head, it feels lengthening. But no, with the extension to get the spine longer, we have a mild arch in the spine. Okay, so feel the feet politely stepping apart. And then as we keep that awareness of the seat, I know that you might feel your tush is closed. So if I'm going to move my blanket aside, I don't want it there. So I want you to scoot your feet enough forward that you still feel your tush just lightly touch the wall. Okay, and then we'll bring the hands forwards. And we're gonna actually try to come up. Remember we were sitting at the bolster long ago and we had our arms reach up. I want you to come up to stand with your back to the wall and walk your feet back. And we're gonna take tree pose with our back to the wall. So to review what that is, you have your back at the wall and however directionally you want to move around your space. And you'll bring your right foot up first. So I have a little bit of distance from my tush to the back. So I'm not completely jammed up at the wall. I have some space because you have a rounded rear, right? So it's like the perfect support for a tree pose. So place the right foot on the inner left leg. if possible. And keep in mind, you have some distance with the arch of the back. So if I'm placing my seat to the wall and I use that wall as support, I still have an arch. And then the arms could go either up, they could go together at the palms in front of the heart. These are postures for the arms as much with the hands together as if the arms were over. So they're both postures. One is not more advanced. You might find hands together, elbows kind of smiling is a good balance for your arm muscles. So locate the connection down into your foot and that openness of the right hip and knee. Yeah, if you decide to move away from the wall and put your weight into all the corners of the feet that you can muster up, you might kind of move away and feel if you can recruit balance through the midsection. Okay, the eyes could be at a gaze looking down or straight in front of you. And as you bring your arms back down to your sides, whether it's your ribs, your hips, we'll begin that process of changing sides, but I like you to let your feet both feel the flooring and then trying to rise up into your leg muscles and then take the second side. How it works for you might be different, right? You might decide to feel yourself kind of push back into the wall and then bring that left knee open and the foot to the right inner leg. Some like to do the pattern of the knee pulls up and then the knee goes out. I find that if my rear touches the wall and then I move the knee open, then I guide it up and then grasp it and bring it to the right leg. That seems to be helpful in my sacrum. So these poses, these standing poses are very fundamental, right, to understanding the balance in the pelvis and the hips. So use the remainder of the class, which will be primarily these standing elements for much of it, to kind of be, maybe even go slower than I advise and just see how it feels for you in these places that are remarkably focused on restorative. So you might move a little bit away from the wall, right? If you're dependent on the wall and you want to keep the dependency, that's fine. Some of us get into this habit of the knee hyperextends when we're pushing back to the wall, the right leg. So moving away from the wall might be helpful in bulking up the circulation around the knee joint. So it's almost as if you want to keep the top of the right thigh kind of pulling up to the hip socket. Right, so it feels like it's lifting up at that seam into the hip socket. And then your glutes, your rear on the right side can grip up, right? And the left side relaxes. Yeah, what a funny pose, huh? It's got all these balancing pieces because it's a balancing pose. Hands together or hands above, separating. Find choice that is curious for your center, whether it's to feel the core bundle move a little bit back and the arms swing up, or the hands light up together in front of the chest. Okay, the feet get a workout. Take a couple more breaths with focus. Remember, you always have a wall to push back into. It's pretty nice to have that wall. Good. It's like a restorative tree, restoring my tree. Okay. Now, as you move your hands down to touch onto your hips or your ribs, glide the knee forward and then lower down, and we're going to shake it out. You take a little shake out with your legs, crack a couple ankle pieces. Move your bolster, and what we're going to do is have just our blocks on the mat. So I want you to observe here. You're going to step away from the wall. You're going to have two blocks at their highest height, and your distancing requirement is very curious here, I find. So what we're going to place is our blocks a little wider than shoulder width apart. I'm distant on the leg stretch away from the wall, my leg length. So what I'm going to do is step away. So I'm about halfway on my mat, I think. Everyone's different length, so that's not going to be the same for you. But I'm going to reach my right leg back. The key is reach, not kick the wall. But as you push your foot back into the wall, I want you to move your, hopefully you have a safe wall to push into. You're going to maybe move your blocks apart, distant with the blocks that are separating, but they're still stabilizing you. This is a challenge for the lungs and the heart. This is very clear, gets into cardio patterns. Sometimes you forget that yoga does that. But when you are holding your balance on one leg, endurance-wise, try turning your right foot open so you're in half moon with the leg. And for most of us, this leg will kind of go up and up. That'll feel easier. So I want you to keep it so it's straight force from the hip joint to the, we'll call it the wall joint. Okay, but we're going all the way to the ankle. And I'm trying to pivot on this inner thigh. You just did this in tree pose. Right? You just had this inner thigh open. Now, the right arm might go up towards the ceiling. You definitely need a block. I mean, unless you have massive flexibility and you touch the floor and can spin around, but the block is really good. And then as you turn and you're enduring this practice, breathing, keep the left knee a little soft, push into the wall with that right foot. Good. Now lower the right hand down. We're going to shuffle out. So pivot the right foot, lower that right foot to the floor. Bend your knees, feet hips distance apart, and feel the spine in extension. So this doesn't mean rounding back. This is trying to reach. So I'll have my blocks under my hands. And if this is hurting your wrists, right, you might need to bend your knees. Some people might decide they want to bring their elbows to their thighs and rest here. But the key is that your spine is an extension, not rounded. So keep the feet pressing. I don't think you have any other choices. Feet have to push the floor. Lower the hands to the blocks. Shift your toes back, feet together. And as you put the weight forward into your core, like you're moving to the roots of the toes, like your tippy toes, kind of let your weight spring a little forward on the foot. It's that time of year, right? We're going to daylight savings, so we're going into this. So spring a little bit, bring the left leg back. And as the leg is up at the wall, does it feel different on the second side for your distancing? I mean, you might notice the flexibility in your legs right here, in your hip and your leg. So if you feel like you need to get closer to the wall for this side, then scoot your right foot back. Use the distancing requirement. These look good. Yeah, the challenge that happens is sometimes people swing their leg too high and then it gets the hip out of alignment here. So keep the bones in the steady warrior three pose right now. We're doing the warrior three without the arms all the way forward, and unless you feel so energetic to stretch your arms in front of you. And then we'll pivot the left foot, turn the foot out at the wall. Right hand is firm on the block. Remember, the block is a little out to the right side for the proportion of the shoulder, the collarbone. And then turn to your left with the left arm lifting and try to get that right hip under you. So you'll feel this knee and the connection from the hip down through the thigh, the sheer force of that. Good. Nice. So get a feel of that rotation through the inner thigh. I don't know if you think this is like tree pose, but I was previously thinking about linking this with tree pose, but it was kind of a hard connection. It was a little bit out of balance for me. So when you pivot, can you stretch your left arm up and turn your focus towards the arm? Okay, make sure you're pushing into the wall. And now as you move now feel how this right sitting bone, when it's in this angle, the challenge for the buttock, for the hip, for the back muscles. We are typically rounded, right? That's our typical daily habit. So when you come back to stabilizing the joint, you're going to pivot, bring the left hand down, pivot through the leg. And now I want you to step your left foot down and the right foot steps back to the wall, and then walk the blocks over to the right. So you're going to take a wide stance, turning to your right. Well, you don't have to turn to the right. You could be left if you want, but the outer side of the one foot is to the wall and your feet are in a wide stance. Okay, so my blocks will go down. Now this is where we can do a wide downward dog, and we're in a wide angle, and we're going to flow the arms forward, feel the flexed and extended spine, and then lower the head down between the arms. Oh, this feels like a relief. This feels like a restorative pose almost. Yeah, be clear that your legs do not have to be in as wide of a stance as you could possibly work yourself into. Find where it's pretty comfortable enough that you can find that width and the circulation through the back muscles. If you would like your elbows to come down to the blocks and just slide them in a little bit, that's completely fine. So get a feel of connection into your back muscles, stretching thoroughly through the legs, all the way through the lower back. Inversion breathing, right? Upside down breath. So the head is down, your brain is down. So when your brain goes just a little below the heart, okay, now pull up the kneecaps. Start to guide yourself a little forward on your elbows or your hands. Come up to the hands for all of us now. And then as you guide your blocks in, for preparation reasons, what we'll do is we'll put our blocks, I think you're going to need them both over there. So just place a block over to the towards your left foot. You'll get the block when you get over there. And then as you come up, place a block between your hands. You're going to have to come up to standing, be a little courteous to your back by bending your knees. Come up so the hands hold the block. You know, the block is in this wide stance, so I have to bring my feet a little closer to feel like I'm stable. But have your feet so they're pretty much parallel. This right foot's going to feel a little funky because you don't want the total foot turning in. But as you lift up with your arms, feel when you bend your elbows so the hands are moving back. So your elbows by your sides of your head like an helmet. And you keep the elbows motioning in a direction up. Yeah. So get that feel of simply the elbows. Okay, and now we're going to turn the left foot towards the, you're rotating your foot. So you're pivoting that foot 90. And when you feel the turn of that left foot, what I want you to do is take the block, grip it, the short end of the block with your left hand, and then lean into that block besides your left foot on the back side, place it behind your left foot, and start to stretch the right arm over the side of the face. So you're in a full Parsvottanasana, which is a side angle pose. There you go. Yeah, it's a bit of a surprise shift. Okay, so feel the reach and the rotation of the chest. Yeah, doing the intensive work of turning, and then of course, turning your head down towards the floor. But feature this range with that right arm. So again, it's like, I think these classes are like circulation education for our structure. But finding where your limit is, like sometimes if you kind of go full blown with these reaching patterns, it's too much in some of the joints. So when we stretch our right arm behind our back now, feel the left leg bending. Make sure the knee is just above the ankle. It's not over the toes. And then stabilize into that left leg. and come up to warrior two. So we're gonna bring the left arm forward. If you got a block kind of in your way, scoot it a little bit. Really bend that left knee. So you've got that full shelf of the leg. If you need to stretch the feet farther apart, that's okay. Be kind to yourself. Right hand on the back. Left arm stretches up and back towards the wall. So reverse warrior. Breathe. Oh, the legs are waking and waking up even more. Or shaking, one or the other. And stretch the left hand back down. And we're going to try half moon one more time. Okay. Good to repeat and see what we're doing. So I'm going to take the second block inside the right foot, and I'm going to find my line of energy. So my left heel, if I draw a line, it's in line with the arch of the right foot to the wall. Yeah. So I've got the left foot, so it's underneath my knee, right? And when I push off of my left foot, I'm going to lift my right foot up the wall and then take my blocks a little forwards of my foot and then try that pivot again. So you're coming into the pose from a different angle, which is a side angle. It's a side pose, right? It's a side opener, but it's a extension of the right arm up. And this does get easier with consistent practice, half moon, but it also requires some sort of hip flexibility to get there. So do the best that you can. If you get fatigue fast, endurance taps out, just come down. But get a feel here of the connection of that right limb up, and maybe your right foot is pushing into the wall. I think that's important. Good. If you have a real deep arch in the spine, you're depending on the arch of the back. See if you can really push into that right foot, but also strengthen around the left kneecap. So don't buckle that knee or stretch it back. Keep a little mild bend of the left knee. And then bring the right hand down to the block. And now we're coming out of it the way that the opposite of the way last time, really. We're going to pivot the right foot, toes down, and then come back, but this time to a forward bend. So take the blocks out of your picture, lower down your ribs towards the legs, take as wide of a stance as you find helpful for you, and then lower down your head this time, all the way. Well, it may not touch the floor, but when I have my spine in this wave of movements, you may notice the circulation at the back of the heart, sweeping down to the brainstem. You can hold your elbows, create some traction in the back, in the neck, in the shoulders. Let the breath unravel. And stirring up, I'm sure quite a bit is stirred up, but notice the pace and fluidity of your breath. Good, we're with it. We're still with it here. Okay, so switch out, bring your feet closer. Now I have my blocks, I'm gonna get them close to my feet. As I step the left foot back, I'm gonna pivot that left foot so the outer bones of the foot are to the wall. And as you bring your hands maybe to your legs, this time we won't have a block between our hands to come into it, so it'll be kind of free. But notice the skin motion right above your thigh bone, right to the hip bone. So there's the space between, that's the flexor. So when you go from almost a straight leg to a bent right leg, can you get a feel of the kind of encapsulation of the muscle over the bone? So it's like it shrink wraps over the bone. And then you find that warrior stance of it. You have a lunge. So many of the programming for the alignment is push back into the left heel. The great thing is that you have a wall. The front of the left hip is going to get opening, which is very cool in this pose. If you can use a wall, it's helpful. So this time we have that right knee bending. And then when I turn to the left, I'm going to press into the wall mildly, and as I lean down to the block, where is it, down there besides my foot, I'm gonna keep that shrink wrap around the right leg. And I'm not super interested in putting my knee so far forward. Some will say, really have the wider stance you can possibly endure. But I like to feel this shrink wrap around my leg, very comfortable around my knee. And then as you stretch your left arm up and over the side of your face, feel if you can get your tail in, so you're not swinging your seat back, but you feel it under you, right? So it's almost like you're trying to sit in the pose, like you could sit in a chair and do this pose, right? So as you feel that reach of the left arm, come up, left hand to the back, and then stretch the right arm up and towards the wall. Let the ribs stretch open, the right arm lengthen through the armpit chest. Breathe. Good, keeping that function of the thigh muscles, the hip joint, steady lunge. Okay, now as we start to lower down, we're gonna try half moon one last time. So you can feel how if you were to charge into the foot, you'd be too far away from the wall. So if you have both hands on blocks, you scoot them back, and then you slide your foot back so it's between the blocks. That's typically the technique. Of course, there's no typical, I don't think. So when I come up, I could come up from this turn. I could have my arm open and then try to proceed up. But you might find the blocks under you first, then lift up the foot, and then proceed the right arm forward, and then come into this position. Now you like to use the wall for your foot, and you want this rotation with all the way up into the hip joint. Right, and so we're working on strengthening the hip, the density for this pose. This is a density pose for your hip and for your lumbar. Good, so the arm is up and the chest is flowing open and the right hand is stable. I would imagine you probably feel somewhat stable with your hand on your block. It's nice to have one. Now, if the inner thigh on that right leg is a little bit buckled, push into the wall, feel the left arm open, turning your armpit chest towards the ceiling, try to rotate, feel the thick back ribs, breathe. Okay, now as you lower your left hand down, you get a feel for the blocks, you'll get a feel for pivoting the left foot down toward the wall. Okay, and then as we start to move, this time we're going to step the foot down to the wall. The back foot is to the wall. You're going to lower your hands on either blocks or the floor. You choose. And then step the right foot back up the wall. So the right foot lifts up to the wall. The left heel can be up at the wall or at the floor. It's up to you. It's really up to your balance. So we're going, it's kind of towards the splits, right? This is more of that positioning, but I'm working with it with an extended spine. Okay. Now lower the right foot, heel can be up or down at the floor. I'm going with the heel up and stretch the left foot up the wall. The arms get the workout here. If it's too much on your wrist, remember you can come down to your elbows. Just be secure with them on the floor, holding your hands. So there's certainly variations. And I'm getting my head below my heart. It's hard to do and have a long discussion at the same time. You can tell it changes your circulation in your sound box, right? With your nose. It's a nasal inversion. That's what it is. And then when you lower your left foot down, you're going to lower down the knees. We're going to take our blanket and we're going to roll it up. Rolling blankets, roll it up, take a bolster, turn it on top of that blanket, be enough away from the wall. And you're going to come to the left hip into side sage. If you are not a you don't like side sage this way, take it another way. So let's say you got a round bolster, you wanna have that here across, 2 blankets. If you have a round and a flat bolster, what you could do is put the round here and the flat here. So there's different ranges of this. We should have a session where we see how many props do you have and try to see what you can do with using them all. So we're gonna take our bolster under our left side. We're gonna lie on it. And then as you reach your right leg, stretching back so the top thigh flesh is rotating down on a ball or block. And then come into the side sage. I'm using the bolster lengthwise because we had so much energy working with the standing set. I don't want us to lose that, but if it hurts your shoulder, you don't do it this way. So if it's like, oh, this doesn't work for me, then you have the bolster so it's across the mat, horizontal. And your arm is between, and you put either a block underneath your blanket so you have proper height for your head. But I want you to condition so your side flesh can release a bit without having to put your weight in your feet. Okay, so feel how you're lying in your side bones. Let the right arm either stretch overhead or let it rest beside you. And come into the side sage that works for you and let the side bones sense the breath, the elevation of the inhale, and the relaxation on exhale. So that pouring of expression from the alternating cycle of in and out breath. And now we'll take a reclining bound angle pose between. So if you have a block nearby, you have a set of them, I want you to use those under the legs. So when you move your sand, you might come up and then position so your back is to a bolster with the short end of the bolster there. You might pivot your bolster. It's okay to work with different bolster heights for reclining bound angle. So likely your body becomes more supple with just all these circulation opportunities. So when I recline back and my knees are moving outwards and the feet are together, you might put sand across your ribs. If you would like sand free moment, you can go sandless. And let the arms expand out from the back flesh, right? So my arms have 2 variations of sensation. And in this one, you can feel the pressure of the shoulders moving into your back space, into your bolster, and the spread of the chest muscles by simply lying back. So any of the experiences that you are kind of coming down from, right, the standing sequencing, let the body feel kind of that illumination, that experience, and that kind of radiance, right? It could be tiring, but let the body keep the warmth from poses stirring up. So the hips might be a little more open than you expect. Make sure the legs are set up on the block so it's comfortable for the hip joint. Okay, and that lower belly is soft. Now we'll take side sage at your own pace on the second right hip side. So when you're ready, you can start to move your blocks. If you have sand, you'll move that off your ribs. And then feel how you can be continuous in mindful motion of simply rotating to the right and that right hip next to the bolster. Left thigh maybe has a ball on the inside. And I kind of push up to the bolster to support my side. And then as my sand goes on my exterior left hip. If it's putting too much pressure in your right hip bone, that's a reasonable issue. You might have to put a towel under your right hip or a blanket. With sand in proportion, you might try to get the sand higher up on the side if you feel it deep on your hip bone, okay? Left arm can stretch over or it can stay directly beside you or down, so it's closer to the floor. And feel the body slowing down. Now we'll polish the pose pattern right now. So when you start to shift your body weight, maybe you're right hip dominant right now. We're going to start to move the sand aside and we'll bring the left knee to the right. And then when you come up, I want you to take the bolster. So your pivot, if you've got a round one there, you're going to swap it for a flat. And then you'll sit on the bolster with your feet to the wall and push into the wall. So as we began, we had these two pose patterns, right? We had the feet together and the feet forwards. So keep it so the feet are beside each other, very closely linked. Push really firm. Bring your arms in front, interlace your fingers, and feel the spine tall. Push, push so that you recruit your core. You know, notice the awareness here. We're going to trade this for legs up the wall, or if you want to do a chair shoulder stand, something where the legs are inverted with quite a bit of lift, right? So they're truly up, right? When you're in the middle of the room, it's sometimes a little false. So, but unless it's with a chair shoulder stand, right? That's the most inverted you can go. But when you're here, I want you to feel the foot placement, push, push. And now as you relax your arms, shoulders rolling back, we're going to set up so you'll slide back off your bolster and then push the bolster to the wall. And you can take different ways of getting into legs up the wall, but you'll want to have a blanket today flat so it's on the middle. Well, it's probably closer than the middle of the mat towards your bolster, huh? You're not that tall. Okay. You'll need just a sandbag and your bolster under your rear. So, and your blanket. So as you turn, you might use a belt actually. So if you're going to do chair shoulder stand, that's different. You won't probably need a sandbag and you won't necessarily need a belt. But you're going to bring your tush to the wall and you're going to swing the legs. Swinging is a good mental perspective. It kind of gets you a little free to get the legs up. And as you're lying into your inversion, keep in the awareness that when I put my sand on my feet, I'm continuing that pressure with the feet, right? But now the pressure goes down through my legs and flows the lymph in the groin. So I'm reversing the gravitational pull on my organs, right? It's usually a downward pull. And if you walk on 2 feet most of the time, unless you crawl, you have more gravitational downward prolapse. So the opposite here. So we're resting the organs with a height, whether it's a chair or it's a bolster, your organs have been kind of promoted. Okay. So whatever's meandering in this promotion, liver, spleen, right? Those are the big ones for the change of circulation. Kidneys get a nice dent in them. They certainly have a little bit of propulsion and blood flow. So revitalizing. So when I put the blanket for me, I'm going to use it under my, just on under my brain, and then flow the elbows open. If you find that the legs are muscling to get to this position and you feel them quivering quite a bit in the pose, what you'll want is a belt. And you don't have to get super fancy, but some people just tie their belt around the legs so that the legs stop muscling. And that's okay, right? You don't have to make it all prim and proper. Let's buckle it together. You can do whatever you want with that, but I find that the muscling of the legs is a truth, it's a reality. They muscle up and they quiver. So sometimes the belt stops that and the legs stop muscling. So feeling that contact of your breath at your skin. Come into the pose of choice for your final inversion and let the back of the pelvis sense the touch that it's on and the experience of the front body vulnerable and open. Right? So this is usually kind of collectively dropping down. So it's uniquely opening in this moments of your day. So stretch the inhale and the exhalation. Use your breath as a stretching tool. Try to stretch the movement of the belly with the breath, massaging the organs. And giving yourself permission to recover and replenish and restore balance internally. Now, if you're in a chair, you might end up moving out of your chair shoulder stand the next few moments. Maybe take Baddha Konasana at the back bar of the chair, and then we can join that. So if you have a belt, you're going to release that clasp around the legs carefully. And then if you want to bring your knees to bending and flow the knees a little towards the ribs and then the sand off, feet together, knees apart. Come into that Baddha Konasana so it goes full circle. Sense of accomplishment really comes with an active practice, huh? And as you come back with the knees towards each other, we're going to motion over to one side so you can roll and bring yourself to a sitting position for a moment. So we have this collective connection, that presence, and have a patience in the presence of each of us sharing our practice. So we have our knees, and in whatever position is comfy, noticing that there is some space in your room for connection to others. And as your hands lift up and balance together, feel if it's balance or if it's force with your palms in unity. And let the brain bow down, acknowledging your efforts in today's practice and breathing in wellness for yourself, but most essentially out towards others.